Carl Jung's profound insights into the human psyche revealed that the journey to discovering your true self is perhaps the most important and transformative adventure you can embark upon in your lifetime, a process he called individuation that requires courage, self-reflection, and the willingness to confront the hidden aspects of your personality that you've spent years avoiding or denying. If you're ready to dive deep into Jung's revolutionary understanding of the human mind and discover practical ways to begin your own journey toward authentic self-discovery, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we regularly explore the depths of psychology and personal transformation, and I strongly encourage you to watch this entire video because Jung's teachings on finding your true self could fundamentally change how you understand yourself and approach your life's most important decisions. Today, we're going to explore Carl Jung's comprehensive framework for self-discovery, examining his concepts of the persona, the shadow, the anima and animus, and the ultimate goal of individuation, while providing you with practical insights that you can apply immediately to begin recognizing and integrating the various aspects of your psyche that make up your complete, authentic self. Jung believed that most people live their entire lives without ever truly knowing themselves, instead operating from what he called the persona, which is essentially the mask we wear in social situations to meet others' expectations and gain acceptance in our communities and professional environments. This persona, while necessary for functioning in society, becomes problematic when we mistake it for our true identity, leading to what he described as a fundamental alienation from our authentic self that manifests as depression, anxiety, a sense of emptiness, or the nagging feeling that we're living someone else's life rather than our own. The journey to your true self, according to Jung, begins with the crucial recognition that you are not your persona, that the roles you play as employee, parent, spouse, or community member are just that, roles. And beneath these socially constructed identities lies a more complex, nuanced, and ultimately more interesting version of yourself that has been shaped by your unique experiences, unconscious drives, creative impulses, and spiritual longings that rarely get expression in your daily social interactions. Jung's concept of individuation represents the psychological process by which a person integrates the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind, leading to the emergence of what he called the self, with a capital S, which is not the ego or the persona, but rather the totalized, authentic version of who you are when all aspects of your personality are acknowledged, accepted, and integrated into a cohesive whole. This process of individuation is not a destination you reach, but rather a lifelong journey of self-discovery that requires you to continuously peel back layers of conditioning, social programming, and unconscious patterns to reveal the unique individual that exists beneath all the roles, expectations, and defense mechanisms you've developed throughout your life. The first major obstacle on this journey is what Jung called the shadow, which represents all the aspects of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or tried to hide from others and even from yourself because they don't align with your idealized self-image or the expectations of your family, culture, or society. Your shadow contains not only negative traits like anger, selfishness, or aggression, but also positive qualities that you've suppressed because they seemed dangerous, inappropriate, or incompatible with the role you felt you needed to play in your family or social group. For example, you might have suppressed your creativity because your family valued practicality, denied your sensitivity because you were taught that emotional expression was weakness, or hidden your ambition because you were raised to believe that wanting success was selfish or arrogant. Jung emphasized that shadow work, the process of identifying and integrating these rejected aspects of yourself, is essential for psychological health and authentic self-expression because what we don't acknowledge in ourselves doesn't disappear, but instead gets projected onto others, creating conflicts in relationships and preventing us from seeing situations clearly. The shadow often reveals itself through your emotional reactions to other people, particularly when you find yourself having strong negative responses to certain individuals or behaviors, because these intense reactions often indicate that you're seeing in others the very qualities you've disowned in yourself. Jung suggested that instead of immediately judging others or trying to change them,
You should ask yourself what it is about their behavior that triggers such a strong response in you, and whether there might be a similar quality within yourself that you've been unwilling to acknowledge or accept. This process of shadow integration doesn't mean acting out negative behaviors or abandoning your values, but rather acknowledging that you have the capacity for both light and dark qualities, and that accepting this complexity makes you more complete, compassionate, and psychologically healthier than trying to maintain an artificially perfect self-image. Beyond the personal shadow, Jung also wrote about the collective shadow, which represents the rejected aspects of entire cultures or societies, such as racism, violence, or environmental destruction, that get projected onto other groups or nations rather than being acknowledged as problems that exist within the collective psyche of the community. Understanding the collective shadow helps explain why societies often scapegoat certain groups or engage in wars where they project their own wanted qualities onto their enemies, and recognizing this dynamic can help individuals avoid participating in collective projections and instead work on integrating their own shadow material as a contribution to reducing collective unconsciousness and conflict. Another crucial component of Jung's model of the psyche is what he called the anima and animus, which represent the unconscious feminine qualities in men and the unconscious masculine qualities in women, respectively. And integrating these contrasexual aspects of the personality is essential for psychological wholeness and the ability to relate authentically to others, particularly in romantic relationships. Jung believed that everyone, regardless of biological sex, contains both masculine and feminine psychological qualities, and that psychological health requires the integration and expression of both aspects rather than the suppression of qualities deemed inappropriate for your gender by society. The anima in men often manifests as emotions, intuition, creativity, and the capacity for deep emotional connection, while the animus in women frequently appears as assertiveness, logic, leadership abilities, and the drive for achievement and recognition. When these contrasexual aspects remain unconscious and unintegrated, they often get projected onto romantic partners, leading to relationships where you expect your partner to carry the qualities you haven't developed in yourself, creating dependency, disappointment, and conflict when they inevitably fail to fulfill this impossible role. Jung observed that many people fall in love with their own anima or animus projection rather than with the actual person, which explains why some relationships that begin with intense attraction often end in disillusionment when the real person fails to match the idealized projection. Integrating your anima or animus involves recognizing and developing these opposite gender qualities within yourself, which not only makes you more complete as an individual, but also allows you to form more balanced and authentic relationships where you're relating to your partner as they actually are, rather than as a repository for your own undeveloped psychological qualities. This integration process often involves challenging gender stereotypes and cultural conditioning that may have taught you to suppress certain aspects of your personality, and it requires courage to express qualities that might not align with traditional expectations for your gender, but are nonetheless authentic parts of who you are. Jung's concept of psychological types, which became the foundation for the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and other personality assessments, provides another framework for understanding your true self by recognizing your natural preferences for how you perceive information and make decisions. Jung identified 4 psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting, and observed that most people have a dominant function that they rely most heavily on, an auxiliary function that supports the dominant, and inferior functions that remain less developed and often unconscious. Your inferior function, the psychological function that you least prefer and have least developed, often holds the key to personal growth and individuation, because it represents aspects of yourself that you neglected but are essential for psychological completeness. For example, if you're naturally a thinking type who makes decisions based on logic and analysis, your inferior feeling function might manifest as difficulty understanding your own emotions or the emotional needs of others, but developing this function can lead to greater empathy, better relationships, and more nuanced decision-making that takes both logical and emotional factors into account. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to become equally skilled in all 4 functions, which would be impossible and undesirable, but rather to become conscious of your preferences and limitations while developing your inferior functions enough to avoid the blind spots and one-sidedness that can result from relying too heavily on your dominant function. The process of individuation also involves what Jung called the transcendent function, which emerges when you learn to hold the tension between opposing forces within your psyche rather than trying to resolve this tension by choosing one side over the other. This might involve learning to balance your need for security with your desire for adventure, your social obligations with your personal needs, or your rational mind with your intuitive insights. And the transcendent function allows you to find creative solutions that honor both sides of these apparent contradictions rather than forcing yourself to choose between them. Jung believed that psychological growth occurs not through eliminating internal conflicts, but through learning to contain and work with these tensions in ways that lead to new insights and creative solutions that wouldn't be possible if you simply chose one side of the conflict and tried to eliminate the other. Dreams play a crucial role in Jung's approach to individuation because he believed that dreams provide direct access to unconscious material and often contain guidance and insights that can help you understand aspects of yourself that remain hidden during waking consciousness.
Unlike Freud, who saw dreams primarily as wish fulfillment, Jung viewed dreams as compensatory, meaning they often present perspectives, emotions, or possibilities that balance or complement your conscious attitudes and help you see situations from different angles. Jung developed a method of dream analysis that involves not just interpreting dream symbols, but also engaging with dream images through active imagination, a technique where you consciously dialogue with dream figures or explore dream scenarios while awake to gain deeper understanding of their meaning and relevance to your psychological development. This active imagination technique can be applied not only to dreams but also to fantasies, creative works, and even difficult emotions, allowing you to engage with unconscious material in a conscious way that promotes integration and understanding rather than simply remaining at the mercy of unconscious forces. Jung also emphasized the importance of paying attention to synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seem to connect inner psychological states with outer events in ways that can't be explained by simple cause and effect, because these synchronistic experiences often signal that you're aligned with deeper patterns of meaning and moving in the right direction on your individuation journey. The concept of the collective unconscious is central to Jung's understanding of human psychology and the individuation process, as he believed that beneath the personal unconscious lies a deeper layer of psychic material that is shared by all humanity and contains universal patterns and themes that Jung called archetypes. These archetypes, such as the mother, the father, the hero, the wise old man, the trickster, and many others, represent fundamental human experiences and psychological patterns that appear in myths, fairy tales, religious stories, and dreams across all cultures and historical periods. And understanding how these archetypal patterns are active in your own life can provide valuable insights into your psychological development and life purpose. Jung observed that during certain life transitions, particularly the midlife crisis, people often experience the activation of archetypal energy that can feel overwhelming and disorienting, but also offers tremendous potential for psychological growth and transformation if approached with consciousness and understanding. The hero's journey, for example, is an archetypal pattern that involves leaving the familiar world, facing challenges and trials, receiving help from wise guides or mentors, confronting a major crisis or dragon, and returning home transformed with new wisdom or abilities that can benefit the community. And recognizing when you're in a hero's journey phase of your life can help you navigate difficulties with greater courage and purpose. Similarly, the archetype of the wise old man or woman often emerges during midlife as people begin to shift from the ego-driven pursuits of the first half of life toward a more soul-centered approach that emphasizes meaning, wisdom, and service to something greater than personal achievement.
Jung believed that the second half of life has different psychological tasks than the first half, with the first half focused on establishing an identity, building a career, and creating relationships, while the second half involves finding deeper meaning, developing wisdom, and preparing for the eventual transition of death by connecting with transpersonal values and spiritual realities. This shift from the first to the second half of life often involves what Jung called the midlife crisis, which he saw not as a pathological condition, but as a necessary psychological transition that occurs when the goals and values that motivated the first half of life no longer provide satisfaction or meaning, forcing individuals to confront deeper questions about purpose, mortality, and authentic inner expression. During this midlife transition, many people experience depression, anxiety, relationship problems, or career dissatisfaction. But Jung viewed these difficulties as symptoms of the psyche's attempt to redirect attention toward neglected aspects of the personality and unexplored potentials that need to be integrated for continued psychological growth. The individuation process during midlife often involves reconnecting with interests, values, or aspects of personality that were set aside during the first half of life in service of social expectations or practical necessities. And this reconnection can lead to significant changes in relationships, career, lifestyle, or creative expression as people align their external lives more closely with their authentic inner nature. Jung also recognized that spiritual development is often an essential component of individuation, not necessarily in the sense of adhering to organized religion, but rather in terms of connecting with something greater than the personal ego and finding meaning that transcends individual concerns and ambitions. This spiritual dimension of individuation might involve developing a relationship with nature, engaging in creative expression, serving others, or exploring philosophical and metaphysical questions about the meaning of existence. And Jung believed that psychological health in the second half of life often depends on finding some form of spiritual connection or transcendent meaning. The process of individuation is not a solitary journey, despite the emphasis on self-discovery and inner work, because Jung recognized that we discover and develop ourselves through relationships with others, and that authentic self-expression requires the courage to show up as your real self in your interactions with family, friends, colleagues, and community. This means gradually letting go of the persona and allowing others to see and know your authentic self, including your vulnerabilities, struggles, creative expressions, and unique perspectives, which can be terrifying because it opens you up to the possibility of rejection or judgment, but also offers the possibility of being truly known and loved for who you really are, rather than for the role you play. Jung observed that individuation often involves periods of loneliness and alienation as you separate from collective values and expectations to discover your own truth. But this temporary isolation is often necessary for developing the inner strength and clarity needed to live authentically and contribute your unique gifts to the world. The goal of individuation is not to become completely independent or self-sufficient, but rather to become conscious enough of your own psychological patterns, motivations, and potentials that you can engage with others from a place of authenticity and choice rather than unconscious reactivity or compulsive role-playing. This conscious engagement with others often leads to more satisfying relationships because you're no longer trying to get others to fulfill needs that you should be meeting yourself, and you're able to appreciate others for who they are, rather than for how well they match your projections or expectations. Jung also emphasized that individuation involves accepting responsibility for your own psychological development rather than blaming parents, society, or circumstances for your problems. Because while these external factors certainly influence your development, ultimately you have the power and responsibility to become conscious of their effects and choose how to respond to them rather than remaining trapped in victim consciousness or unconscious reactions to past experiences. The individuation process often involves what Jung called the union of opposites, where you learn to integrate contradictory aspects of your personality rather than trying to eliminate the parts of yourself that seem problematic or undesirable. Because Jung believed that psychological health comes from wholeness rather than perfection. And wholeness includes both light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, rational and irrational, masculine and feminine qualities. This integration of opposites often creates internal tension and conflict, but Jung saw this tension as creative rather than pathological because it's precisely in the space between opposites that new possibilities emerge and creative solutions to life's challenges become available. Learning to tolerate and work with this internal tension rather than immediately trying to resolve it by choosing one side over the other is one of the key skills of individuation. And it's what allows you to respond to complex situations with creativity and wisdom rather than falling into rigid patterns or black and white thinking. The practical application of Jung's insights to your own individuation journey involves developing what he called a conscious attitude toward your unconscious, which means paying attention to dreams, emotions, bodily sensations, creative impulses, and synchronistic events as sources of information about aspects of yourself that may not be immediately apparent to your conscious mind. This might involve keeping a dream journal, engaging in creative expression like writing, art, or music, spending time in nature, practicing meditation or other forms of inner reflection, or working with a therapist or analyst who understands Jungian principles and can help you recognize and integrate unconscious material. Jung also recommended paying attention to what he called autonomous complexes, which are clusters of emotions, memories, and associations that seem to have a life of their own and can take over your behavior in certain situations, often leaving you wondering why you reacted so strongly to something that didn't seem to warrant such an intense response. These complexes often develop around early experiences
or unresolved conflicts and can be triggered by current situations that remind the unconscious of these earlier experiences. And becoming conscious of your complexes allows you to respond to current situations more appropriately rather than reacting from old wounds or unfinished business. The individuation journey also involves developing what Jung called ethical consciousness, which goes beyond following external moral codes to include taking responsibility for the impact of your actions on yourself and others, and making conscious choices about how you want to live based on your own deeply considered values rather than simply conforming to social expectations or rebelling against them. This ethical development often involves difficult choices and sacrifices, as you may need to let go of relationships, career paths, or lifestyle choices that are incompatible with your authentic self. But Jung believed that this kind of ethical living is essential for psychological health and genuine satisfaction in life. Throughout this individuation process, Jung emphasized the importance of maintaining humility and recognizing that complete self-knowledge is impossible, because the unconscious is vast and mysterious, and there will always be aspects of yourself that remain hidden or unknown, and approaching this journey with curiosity and openness, rather than the goal of achieving perfect self-understanding, allows for continued growth and discovery throughout your lifetime. The journey to your true self, according to Jung, is ultimately about becoming who you were meant to be, rather than who you think you should be or who others expect you to be. And this authentic self-expression not only brings personal fulfillment, but also allows you to contribute your unique gifts and perspective to the world in ways that serve the collective good while honoring your individual nature. Jung believed that when individuals undertake the work of individuation and begin living from their authentic self rather than from unconscious patterns or social conditioning, they not only heal themselves, but also contribute to the healing of the collective unconscious. Because conscious individuals are less likely to project their shadow onto others or participate in collective unconsciousness that leads to conflict, oppression, and environmental destruction. The journey to your true self is therefore not just a personal development project, but a contribution to the evolution of human consciousness and the creation of a more conscious, compassionate, and authentic world where individuals are free to express their unique gifts while also recognizing their interconnection with all life.